Where in Jamaica were you born?
Kingsvale, a place called Riverside.
Where's that in Jamaica?
It's part of another, at the extreme end. My parents didn't, my mother came from Kingsvale, my father came from Claremont, but it was a custom that, especially with the first child, the daughter normally goes home and have the parents home unless the parents were near enough, but they weren't, so I was born not at the family home, but at my aunt's home where my mother was brought up.
Okay. And that was the norm for the firstborn child, just women?
Well, my mother was really brought up very sheltered by a aunt who had no daughters, only son. And she was treated special. I was told she was an angel that came to this earth for special purposes. And as we go on, you will discover. Yes.
Okay, tell me more about your family.
What family? My immediate family now, yes, or my extended family?
When you were in Jamaica.
Right. I'm one, at the time, I was one of 4 children, eldest of 4. And after I was 3 years old, coming from Kingsvale, I went to live with my mother and father again, because my aunt had me for 3 years. Then I started going to a private school, which they told me I walked at 7 months. I couldn't wait to walk and I couldn't wait to talk. So I was in a hurry to do everything. I went to a private school, and I used to be taken to this private school on the back of a bicycle by a teacher friend of a family who went that way because it was 3 miles away. I enjoyed that private school. And then I can't remember my brothers and sisters coming along because my father was never at home. He was always away doing something, fishing out in the plantation. And my mother was, she sewed, but she didn't really sew for anybody. She was always sewing, but she wasn't sewing for other people. And she had someone to look after the children, someone who cooks and wash, and then there was one who, a young man who normally goes about the yard, see to the kids and the dogs, and if they need anything fetching during the day, he would do it. Because we actually live in a valley. At the bottom of a valley we actually live. And it was called a Cajun Call, and nobody goes there unless they had a grand occasion, because it was far down. And it was a lovely place, because I can sit now and see it exactly as it was, which I have visited. Every time I go to Jamaica, I just go and have a look. I can't really see anything now but greenery, because nobody will live there, you know. And that was my early years recollection. So I missed a bit of parentage in that first 3 years, which I didn't know I missed. Then I had a brother. He was next to me when I went back home. There was a brother. And then other children came along. But my father came to England. There's a gap between 3 and 6 going to private school before I went to a junior school. My father went to England when I was 6, and hardly not knowing my father because of going out, coming in, he never bothers with the children. And I really can't say I know my mother that well neither. I can remember better the maid, because she was always bathing us and whatever. Well, I was all looking after everybody because I was always that way inclined. And I wasn't that young when I went there. My father came to England, and he was in England 1 year and 8 months. And he sent for my mother, who didn't want to come to England, because she didn't want to leave her children. They were both Christians. They were Church of God, New Testament Church of God Christians. And her idea was, I was told all these stories, we were children, they never talked their private business in front of children. And I was only told this later on in years, not too long back, people are beginning to think that I'm old enough to know this, you know, after all these years. But nevertheless, it's better late than never. She didn't want to come to England, but she said, wherever my husband wants me to be, that's where I've got to be. So she came to England very reluctant. And when my father left, my mother was expecting a child, and he was born a boy, and he was the 5th child. I missed the others out, didn't I? I mentioned a brother, but I didn't mention the sister in between. There was a sister in between, and then a brother that was born. And my mother came to England with him when he was 9 months old. And while she was here, she actually had another child, Velia, and she returned home pregnant with another child. That child died shortly after birth. But the biggest gap of it all was when mother came to England, because she was willed to do so by her husband, and he decided where the children should go. She hadn't got a choice, and he even promised someone one of his children earlier on in his life, when he nearly got drowned, and he was saved by the lady who was nearest, looking out on the sea and see what was happening. She got help for him and saved his life. And he promised as a young man, before he was even married, that I shall give you one of my children. And the crunch came when 4 children to be left with someone. And it was too much, and everybody was clamoring around that they want us, so they had to share us out. So we were divided. Now,
how did you feel about that? How old were you at the time?
I was 7.5. Dad was only here 7.5, going 8. Dad was only here 8 and 8 months before he sent for my mother. And in those days it was a novelty, because you find that the men who came to England, no women came at first, it was all men. They were Christian men from good backgrounds, and they needed people to work, and they came. And majority of men didn't actually send for their wives, but he didn't want to be on his own, so he sent for his wife. Some even went back home because they didn't like how the atmosphere is here. You work all hours. They used to have to work from 8 hours in the morning till 8 hours at nights. They could work 6-7 days if they wanted to, which they did, to send money back home. But the divide split the family up. The lady who saved my father's life, she actually chose the 3rd child, which is Jaretha. And he allowed her to have who she wanted. My mother hasn't got a say. I was then left with my father's mother. My brother and I was left with my father's mother. And the 3rd child, the 4th child, the first 2 was left with my father's mother, our grandmother, and the 3rd child was the one that the lady who saved my father took. And the 4th child, they regard her as being a bit young to be left with just anybody. So my my grandmother on the mother's side had the 4th child, and my mother took the 5th child to England with her.
So do you remember how you were feeling about being divided at that time?
I wasn't an emotional child. I was a child who sit and watch. I didn't play. I just watch others, because nobody should never hurt me. So I just watch others. And I used to watch all that was going on with the adults. I can't remember now to tell you what I felt at that time when my parents were both over here, until problems started. We weren't, my grandmother wasn't very well, so the lady who saved my father's life and had the third child had us as well. She didn't treat us the same as she treated my sister, because she treated her as if it was her own child, because she's of the opinion now that she has been given this child as promised, and she was going to keep her. So she treated her like a princess, but she treated us quite differently.
So how old were you at that time?
I was then, didn't stay nowhere very long, you know. I think we probably had our grandmother probably 6 to 7 months, and then we went to this lady, and I think we left there I left there before I was even 9. We weren't there very long, because my grandmother, who's got the 4th child, got news that we weren't cared for the way we should do, and she came to visit. But before that, my father had a friend that when they came to England, they left the land to that family, because this man was his best friend. And he had a very large family, and he could have done with a larger house and more land with more fruit trees. So he left it to his friend to live on and to reap the crop. And I have to put this bit in now, talking about being with this lady who didn't treat us as good as our sister. The reason why I remember that, because, you know, kindness is done along the way that one can't forget. At times when our crop has come in, different crops on the land, because we had everything you could think of, he would load a donkey full either side, and he's carrying some. And he used to come wherever we were in Jamaica. He'd find us and he'll bring us crop from the land. Wasn't very often, but when he came well. And he came, and when he saw the situation, he was the one who wrote back to my father and said, I don't think you'll be very pleased with the way 2 of the children are treated, and what you're going to do about it. Well, he never mentioned to us, he just looked on, but our grandmother came shortly after for a visit. And on seeing me, she took one look, because they had me carrying things on my head until I used to have very long hair, and I had no hair in the middle of my head because the load had sort of rubbed it off, and the weight on my neck. No wonder I got a problem with my neck now, because my head used to be twisted under it. And my grandmother, they had to help the load down off my head. I mean, all this is good history. A lot of people's going to remember that this sort of thing happened. Yeah. And it is the truth. I'm just saying it as it is. My grandmother helped the load down off my head, and she said, this is your last minute here. And she took me right away, because it's not what she planned to do. She took me right away, but she couldn't see a way to take my brother. He wasn't treated too badly, but being the eldest and I was a girl, you know, it's a big difference. So she left him, she took me, but the week after she went back and took him as well, without the lady's consent, but she didn't put up any fuss.
Okay.
So the child that she was actually given was still left.
But do you actually remember your childhood overall as being particularly happy?
No. I can't tell you where the happy bit was. I can't remember it as being happy. It was full with mystery, surprises, what's going to happen next, and thing. No, it wasn't a happy childhood for me.
Was it the same in school?
Well, I came to England in 1955, and that wasn't happy. I was a novelty, and I was seen as a gollywog and all sorts of things, because I was one of the first children to came.
So when you were in school in Jamaica before you came over?
Yes. At school I was okay. I was very bright at school. I outshone everything. It never stopped me from getting on. And because I did very well, I was ahead of my years. When I actually came here at the nearly 12, well, a month of 12, I was 4 years ahead of my school days, because on the continents, they move you along as you can cope. Yeah. They don't hold you back to how old you are. Okay. And of course, when I came here, the big shock was that I was put with children who were learning things that I learned 3 years before. And because of my age, I now had to be back with the first year. And I wasn't even suited for first year because I'd missed the intake. I didn't miss it. My birthday actually goes over November. So it means instead of getting in when I'm 11, I would get in when I'm nearly 13, 12 and a half, going the following year. Yeah. You understand how the school year work here. So then I was kept in first year beyond the time I ought to. And then it went on. It wasn't very pleasing at all because I was bored stiff. There was nothing they could teach me. Because at the time, what they were teaching those children I'd learned 3 years before. The only thing is, my general knowledge wasn't even up to scratch for the first year, although I'd that far further ahead with everything else, because their general knowledge take in the current affair and what's happening in the country. Yeah. And of course I wasn't here and I didn't know. And I wasn't too interested neither. After the view I got when I came, I was mesmerized for a long time, you know. Yes, those years. It mainly wasn't very happy because I had to look after my brothers and sisters.
So they came over with you at the time?
No, the gap came when my mother came back from England. And as I say, she was pregnant, and she had a child that only lived 3 months, and it died. Your little Pearl.
Do you remember that personally yourself, or is this something?
Oh, I remember it. I remember it personally.
Did it upset you?
Very pretty, fair-looking child, very, very pretty. I can remember her face even now because we saw her. She was delivered at home and she died at home.
How did you feel?
And things began to go wrong after my mother had her. Although people think things were wrong before my mother had her, but to me I didn't know what was wrong, you know. Seems all right, or probably I wasn't looking for anything in particular. But she had postnatal depression with the last child she had in England, that was Villia. She had postnatal depression with her and nobody knew. Nobody detected it. And it wasn't highlighted then. It only was highlighted 20 odd years after, when she was classed as being mentally ill. And then when the history came out of different things and different relatives were saying different things, my father actually said to us when we talked to him that my mother was funny from she had the last child, but he thought because she had a child and had a baby already, well, he wasn't very old to look after the one she took over when he was 9 months. He thought it was just having a baby and she'd settle down. But then she was determined that she didn't want to stay here then. She wants to go home and look at her other children. And she was only here a year and 8 months when she came with a 9-month-old and she had one child. And then she was pregnant when she came home, but not very big. She had months to go. She came home, well, on a holiday. She said she comes on a holiday, but she had no hope of returning back. She didn't want to go back. Because from what I can gather of my mother over the years, that she's been ill from 1955 onwards. When I married and had children, she said to me, never leave your children. If you can't take them with you wherever you go, never leave them. And I feel that because she'd left us, of not her choice, she felt that there was a big gap there was a void, and she didn't want us to have the same experience. It's a long story. It goes much deeper than that, far much deeper than that. She was hospitalized in Jamaica, and it means we were split up again, because she came home from England. We all was with her mother, but the place wasn't big enough to keep us, so we had to go back to our original family home. By then, the Spences, who was my dad's friend, a lot of them had come to England. Mr. Spence hadn't come to England at the time. He just moved back to his old house because his children were growing up and doing their own thing. My father had children late in life compared to his friend. His friend already had 4 or 5 children. When my father was 29, he just got married. So we started having children late as Jamaica's standard, that was late.
So but before time, you said you were split up again after your mom came back?
Yes, we were split up again after my mother came back because she became mentally ill. I couldn't recognize mental illness or anything that was indifference. I think I was just mesmerized just having her around and to ourselves. But the condition in which she came home in and the condition in which we went back to, after being to England and to go back to Jamaica, to live down in a valley, so far down, no neighbors nearby, it's like living in a desert island by yourself. You know, so I'm just looking on probably how she might have felt, which she couldn't converse to tell us because we weren't going to understand. So,
so you came to England when you were 12, yeah?
Yeah. Came to England because...
Who did you come with?
Well, I was the eldest of the children, and 2 others follow me, because the daughter that my father's friend was given. We went to the same school, and we used to see each other. Not always did we go to the same school, but when our mother came back, we went to the same school, because we went to many different schools, having to change areas, and with one grandmother, and then with a friend, then with another grandmother. I changed school many times. And my sister decided she wants to be at home with us when she heard our mother's come back. So one of the dinner times, we went home for dinner, and she never came. She doesn't come with us because she never used to. This lady's husband actually got a shop not far from the school, and that's where she used to stop and have her dinner. Where we used to be in other towns, that's where she had her dinner, because she wasn't with us. So she still went there to have her lunch at a school dinner break. And this day we'd gone home for lunch, and when we're coming back, we normally call and we all go up to school together. And when we came back, the lady's husband was standing by the door, and he said, "Where is Jarita?" I said, "She didn't come with us. She never comes with us." He said, "Well, I haven't seen her." We went back to school and Jarita wasn't there. Jarita had made her way around to where we live, but not go down until we've actually gone back to school. Okay. And she hid in the bushes until it was dark. And when it was dark, she came out because she was afraid. So we wouldn't hear any news from anybody until the next day whether or not she was found. But then nobody came to ask my mother, "Well, have you seen her?" or whatever. So she come out, and my mother said, "My child has come home." And she wouldn't let her go back. And my father will insist that he'd given this child to her and he can't take her back, because he's going to get, and this lady's never had any children. So you can just imagine how glad she was for her. And that brings a great upheaval, between mum and dad with that child, with my sister not actually staying.
But did your whole family actually come back together in
Yes.
England?
Yes, we did come back together eventually. 4 of us came in one go.
Yeah.
Now, because of course that sister who was away, she now joins us. So I was the first, and a brother, and then 2 sisters. We all 4 came together, and we had the stewardess on the air hostess on the plane to just supervise if we need any help. They all came on my passport because they couldn't hold a passport, they weren't old enough. And then after 6 months, the 2 youngest was left. The young brother who came to England when he was 9 months, and the one who was born in England, those 2 were left. And 6 months later, they came. My sister wouldn't eat. She looks as if she was suffering with malnutrition when she came, great big stomach and like in a state of shock. Yeah. That's how she was. My brother wasn't too bad. He was okay.
So where were you settled in England?
In Wolverhampton. We came straight to Wolverhampton. Straight to Wolverhampton. Never left Wolverhampton.
So you lived with your father?
Yes, we lived with our father, and he had somebody to look after us. Well, to supervise, because I was already taking care of my brothers and sisters when Mom had become a bit neglectful, but I didn't know that to be mental illness, and I was already looking after them. And my uncle had told my dad that I can look after them so there wouldn't be any difficulty. So that was how it was. We came, and then I looked after them in a sense that the 2 small ones were looked after by somebody else because they were too young to do the same hours we do at school and everything. They need someone who, so they were looked after by someone else. So we were parted again from them. And I look after them, see that their clothes are ready for school, iron and shop after school and all that. And whatever happens, I would get the blame. So I've been mother of my brothers and sisters from an early age, and I'm still mother to them. Yeah. If anything, my father will blame me that they always come to you and nobody comes to me, So by the time I had my children, I feel as if I've grown up a generation already, Okay.
So you're talking about your school days and when you first came to England. You were describing the racial abuse that you suffered.
It wasn't severe. It wasn't severe because I didn't quite know how to use it and terms it in any way. But we used to go swimming, and there was a pool when I combed my hair out. They used to go, oh golly wog, and all sorts, because this mass of hair all over the place. And apart from that, they even say, oh, let us see your tail. A monkey, you say, originator monkey. Let us see your tail. Things like this. I still didn't play. I still stand around and watch. I couldn't tell you that I've got a schoolmate who I can contact or will talk. But I walk around town and I see them. I recognize them and they don't recognize me. And I say, hello, Maury, or hello, so-and-so. And they look at me. I said, yeah, it's me. And it takes them ages. They can't recollect that it's me, but I know every single one of them when I meet them in town, however old I get. And there was just one person that, she wasn't a schoolmate. I met her when I was working, actually. But she was a friend. Up till this day, that girl sent me, big woman, she's older than I am. Up till this day, she sends me a Christmas card every year. And I keep on saying, we must meet, I make a date, but it never works out, So
how were your school days? How did you do in school?
Well, I was doing quite well up to the 4th year. When I got to the 4th year, they moved me into a B grade. Even though I came top of the class nearly always in everything. My English was down because my grammar was bad.
Which school was this?
Graiseley.
Graiseley.
Graiseley School. They kept me down, they wouldn't move me. And it was when I went in the 4th year, they moved me into a B grade. But then the time was to end. The time was just too close for any good to become of it. So I wouldn't say I didn't get anything from school in here. It was a wrong age. And when I talk to, I've been in various organizations over the years, and when we have talks on the background of the children from Jamaica and whatever, and their parents is trying to say, I said, I can tell you, I know, I'm one of them, that at a certain age, say 10 and a half, 11, already too late for a child to be transported into England. Because if the background wasn't good, they're not going to make the grade for the 11 plus. And if it is good, they're going to be kept behind. They won't be able to go ahead of their years like they did abroad. So there is a problem either way. Plus they've got their environment, and they're like a new child to the parents, who they think they're having an extension of their family who they know, but they don't know you. Because you're not like them, you haven't got their values, you've got the values of everybody else around you. If you choose to stick to one lot, if you don't, you're doing several different things. This one do it this way and the other one do it a different way, or do something else a certain way, and you just choose which one you're going to pick up and which one you're going to hold on to.
So are you saying that you identified more with English white people or with your father's culture? Which one would you say?
Well, I always see myself as neutral. I see myself as neutral because I will pick up the best in any situation. And if it's good on the Jamaican side, I've got it. And if it's good on the English side, so I've got it. I just leave all the rest behind. I just don't take it on board. So I really don't, I don't know, I don't say I like my Jamaican root. Well, it's obvious. You're black, you can't get away from it. But then again, there are bits of England that really suited me. It didn't suit me until I was able to choose well in my teens, in my 20s. It didn't suit me before then at all, because you were governed by what they say. For instance, when I was going to have my first job, my father said, I can't afford for you to go to college, because things wasn't free as free as it is now. And he said, I can't afford for you to go to college because I've got 5 other children to take care of and I'm the only one working. I can't afford it, plus I have to take care of them. So college wasn't on. So when I was get my first job, we went to the employment bureau and she said to me, your memory isn't good. I don't know what we can give you to do. And this was one of the teachers' report, that my memory wasn't good. Admittedly, I can't say my memory wasn't good then, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't good, because of all I have to think about what I have to do after school and before school. I didn't take it as a burden, I did it joyfully, but nevertheless, I think it ended me somewhat of getting on with myself, you know. And I really... Academically, yes. And I find that I had to go to work, and my father would say, you know, you won't get a job in an office. You won't get a job here, you won't get a job there because you're black. My father had that belief. So when we went to the bureau and she said, oh, your memory isn't good, we can't see what you have to... My father said, oh, anything like that. So...
What did you believe? What did you believe?
Well, I believe I could get along. I know I need further education and all that to do. I wanted to be an air hostess. Always wanted to be an air hostess. And the teacher came next and the nurse came next. And if I couldn't be any of those, I wanted to be a doctor's secretary or a solicitor's secretary. I want the interesting words and interesting terms and something to really dig into. Those were the things I wanted to do. And my father said, because I told him, he said, well, air hostess is not on. Then he said, if you go and do nursing, in those days you had to live in. I took the test at Royal and I passed. And when I told him, because I didn't tell him, when I told him, he said, so you want to live away from home now? Well, of course, there's the other children. We should know they're coming up now in age. We're all 2 years older than each other.
Yeah.
So me being 16, they were 14, 12, and so on. And he said, good girls don't leave home. So I thought, that's it. You know, I thought, that's it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here under his nose. And that's the decision I made. So I never moved. I just stayed at home. The first job I got was at Wolverhampton Box Company, which no longer exists. I was a platen maker, but I insist now I can't be an air hostess, so I was going to be a nurse. And I said I was leaving when I was 18 to go be a nurse.
Yeah.
And of course, take the test and whatever, and Dad said so and so, and he said, but you've already got a job. They knew at work I wanted to go into nursing. So they sent me to learn first aid. In those days, you had to go to the Polytechnic for 3 months, and then you had to go to the Royal Hospital for 3 months and the casualty unit. So I was trained to be a first aider, and I actually worked for Wolverhampton Box Company as a first aider. But many accidents doesn't happen, although cardboard can cut you like a knife.
Yeah. We
had many accidents. The gravest accident when somebody jumped up a brick wall and chopped their knee in two. That was and that was one of the managers.
So what year were you doing that first aid course?
Pardon?
What year?
Oh dear.
Just
before I was 18, because I knew I was going to leave. I always talked to the girls and I spread the news around, since he's leaving to be a nurse. So the managers got me to, they even tried once to get me into the office, you know, but the hours didn't, well, the hours would have been all right, but I didn't see the point going in the office when I really wanted to go into nursing, you know, just 6 months or 8 months before.
Yeah.
So they did that to keep me. But by then I started having children. I had my first child. And that put a spoke in the wheel, because even though I thought I could still go and do the nursing, I couldn't, because we used to have to work from 8 in the morning till late at night. Well, you can't leave a baby at the nursery all that time. So that was my first child. Then I had, well, in those days that too was a novelty. You know, having a child at that age, you know. So I had to go away and have this child, which my father wanted me to have him adopted, and I wouldn't. I had him, I was married, I had him put in a children's home, and his father supported him there because he was 6 years older than me, and my father thought he was too old for me. So that was that. It just was not going to be because he was too old for me. And it went on. Then, of course, he was 5 when I met my husband, and I'd got married. Oh, he was about 4. I got married then. And then I had a child when he was 6. I've got 4 children, and 3 of them are 5 years older than each other. Each one is 5 years older than the other. It's only the last one is 1 year and 10 months.
So were you working throughout that time?
I work after all my children. I work after all my children.
Did you find any problems in working?
Well,
physically and socially?
no. Well, remember the first child was in a children's home. So I carried on working at Wolverhampton Box Company. And then I got married. I had the second child. And they wanted me to come back to work there. So what they used to do, every weekend, they used to send somebody to see me and bring me a basket of fruits and some flowers just to see that I was still at home, you know. And the allowance was that I took my daughter, I said, no, I think now that I will never leave my children neither. Because my son was only there temporarily until I make a life that I take him back. And I said I wouldn't leave her with people who were going to put their values and their like and dislike into her. But I had to go to work, so at 6 She was 6 months old when I went back to work. Normally people go back to work 6 weeks after you've had a baby. That's the time for going back. But she was 6 months when I went back to work. And all that time, every week they sent someone. They didn't even check. Mind you, didn't have to have a first aid at your workplace in those days. They did that as in advance to keep me. But then I was so foolish, I didn't realize, I didn't think of it as them blighting my future by keeping me doing first aid when I could have gone and do something better. I just saw it, oh yes, this is great, you know. And then of course, when I went back to work, my second child then went to the nursery on the Birmingham New Road. And I used to live at St. Mark's Road at the time. And they say, come in whenever you can manage. Although I tried to be there at 8 because the first day they should be on the floor when they actually start. But when the weather was bad, if I got there 8:30, they'd still give me from 8 o'clock. And in the evening, if the weather was bad, they'd say, go on, go, you know. And they were so good to me that I wouldn't dream of leaving. After I've had the first child, I thought, well, where am I going to have a job that people let me go and I can come in late, and you know, that sort of thing. So I stayed at Wolverhampton Box Company. I could say I had my first bit of joy and pleasure working at Wolverhampton Box Company.
So what's your next job?
I only ever had 2 jobs. I work at the hospital after that. You know, I've never had another job.
How old were you when you started working as a nurse then?
My last child was 3 years old. I was 29 when I started working at New Cross.
What year was that then?
1973. 1973, I think.
So was it a dream come true?
No, it was a different capacity actually, because I wanted to be trained then as a nurse on the general side. And the money that I'd saved before I stopped working to have the last child, the money just went in between, and now my house was coming apart. Although my husband was working, everything needed repairing, the irons needed replacing. And I thought, it came August, I said, no way am I going to finish my last pound from the bank and I haven't got any money of my own. Because when I get down, I can go down and treat myself to something. And I don't have to say, oh, you'll say, where you get that from? I said, it's not your money. And that was all it was, you know. So I got that first bit of joy thinking, well, yeah, I'm going to do something. But I wanted to go in the theatre, you see. I want to be a theatre sister. I want to see operation and operation and things. But of course, you've got to work your way up to get there. So I looked into the general side to be trained, and they had a waiting list of 3.5 years. And I thought, well, I can't wait 3.5 years to earn money, never mind about the training. So I went to the psychiatric on the way out. I stopped in their offices and said, have you got vacancies? And they said, they've got lots of vacancies for part-time workers. Well, I didn't want to work full-time because I still wasn't going to let anybody look after my children. So I had an application form from there. They interviewed me within 2 days because I handed them the form personally. And they interviewed me in 2 days, and I was working in 4 days before I had a medical or anything. And I was working from 5 till 9. So I was able to see to my children all day. They came home for dinner. I was home when they came home in the evening. And then the evening meal will be ready, and then I'll be off to work.
So what's it like working in the nursing profession as a black woman?
Well, by then there was a lot of black nurses. When you look around, you couldn't see white nurses for black nurses. And a lot of them actually got their experience from, when saying so, I'm not a qualified nurse. I'm still a nursing assistant. I'm not a qualified nurse. But there was lots of qualified nurses who started like I did and ended up being awarded an SEN certificate because their work was that good. They had to do a drug assessment and all that anyway. They didn't just get it and not knowing the works. But they were so excellent in the work that a lot of them became SENs through that particular mean. But then there are others that they deterred from doing SRN, the bright ones, who actually came here to do SRN. They deterred them from doing SRN and kept them at an SEN level, at saying that, you know, you can do your SEN and then we allow you to train. And until recently, we still had a backlog of SENs who wanted to be staff nurses to train further, and they weren't allowed. But because we have the UKKC now, the UC, oh, I can't even get it right, UKCC now, they are...
does that stand for? Sorry?
It's a European thing. Everywhere should be the same. A nurse should come from China and work in the hospital and don't have to be it should be the same as they do in China. It should be the same as in Germany. So it's a collective thing now that whatever training you get, it should be valid wherever you go. So they shouldn't say, well, you're from England, your training is different. So they have to now keep up with all the training. So all the SENs who were still in practice then had the opportunity. And the last few had only just qualified last year as staff nurse after they've done 20, 25 years of SEN because they were just held back. Mm-hmm.
How did the patients treat you?
Well, for some reason or the other, the patient think, general patients, which I didn't deal with because I didn't get a job on the general side, but being there myself and see how the general patient treat the nurses, because they're black, they somewhat want to use them even more than they would their few white nurses. But then again, you find they think that the black nurses were kinder and gentler. Now, the psychiatric patients is another story, because I work with the psychiatric patients, and if they were racist before and they were in control, when they're mentally ill, they're out of control. Therefore, their racist remark comes out. If they see you and you look good, they'll get a cup of tea and throw at you and wet all your clothes and whatever. There's others who call your name or all the terrible names you can think of. They're mentally ill, but it was in them before. Because when someone becomes mentally ill and they're out of control, everything is letting loose and coming out. They've got no control until they gradually get modified with drugs and fall back into line. And people would look at me and they said, I was awful to you, because they remember. I was awful to you. I called you everything under the sun. I threw a tear at you, and you never one day retaliated. You never say a wrong word, and you still look after me. And then they draw to your side. But year after year, you find some of those same people return. And in the end, they're the ones who, if another patient's come and be cheeky to you, they'll say, you can't talk to her like that, knowing that they've had their chance, but they've changed their mind. You know? So racism was rife.
So how did you manage to cope? What was it?
Well, my motto in life was always, from all the things I've gone through, and I've taught my children the same. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but name don't hurt. Now, when people are calling you names, are you all these things they're calling you? Are you? You know, I said, no, I'm not any of those things. So they can continue. It bounced off me. I don't say if somebody tried to draw my blood, I probably wouldn't do something in those days. I most likely would. If you see it coming, you try to defend yourself. But I've had that barrier. I don't names or anything. Never. I just treat all people as people, whoever they are. They're people. I don't see one as being more special than anyone. And the one that you find some people won't bother with, I will bother with that one. Because they've got a chance, they've got an opportunity, they've got a life the same like everybody else, you know. And there's good in each one.
So this is your attitude about how to treat people. That's
oh yes, yes.
Where do you get this attitude from?
That is a background thing. My father, I can't tell you about my mother's principle at all, but I know my father has always been kind and generous to people. Half of Wolverhampton was bought here because of him. in those first years. He was the first one to buy a house because they couldn't get anywhere to live, because being black, they didn't want to house them. And the lady who actually housed him at first, and a cousin and a brother, she's the one who actually looked after my two younger sisters at the time. So she started the ball rolling by giving them dwelling to live, and she was very kind to them. And then my father bought his first house, he got other people over, and by the time we came, he had 3 houses. Other people were living in the other houses, and we were living in the very first house that he had bought. So my values come along the way, but I remember my mother's mother the most. When we were leaving Jamaica, she came in and she said, I have taught you, I have groomed you, and now you've got to go out in the world and learn. But if you remember what I've told you, you can survive and you'll always remain the same. And that was, I'll never forget what my grandmother told me. Yeah. She said, you've got to go out and learn. But I'm the one who I always observe things, and I always look and wait. And it doesn't matter what they're going on with or what they're about to do. I just wait to see the outcome. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But I'm saying, well, I wasn't there and I didn't join it. You know, learn from other people's mistakes.
So was your grandmother the biggest influence on you?
I would say they had a major big, she didn't talk much, but she said that to me when I was coming away. She used to just look at me, you know, she used to just look at me. Nobody never talked to me much, because I wasn't a wanderer, but I used to just sit and look at everything that's going on. Or what they think I don't see, I've seen, you know. But I don't know. I don't want to say I'm self-made, but there's so much things I've passed through that I don't want to be. And a lot of things, a lot of people, I don't want to be like them at all. And I choose my values. But then I've inflicted my values onto my children. You'll see a lot of things I do, it's a replica of me. And I don't think it's bad. They haven't picked up my bad bit because I got rid of it a long time ago. I got rid of it a long time ago. And life is funny. I think we should always be open to taking into new things and new ideas if things isn't right. And I'm very good at forgetting what I want to forget. If I thought, well, that is rubbish, I've got no room in my head for that, I can forget it. And I walk out of here and you question me about it. I can't remember. I've just got rid of it.
So does that mean you've put aside all your dark experiences in life?
Yes, I have. I've moved on. I probably could have been, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if we didn't come to England. I think as the first child, and I was doing so well in education, I probably would have been different. Education-wise, yes, probably a different type of job. Something, I don't know. But I would say that I haven't done too badly because I've pushed myself. I go into those areas I was with the, in the early years I was with the Caribbean Association, West Midland Caribbean Association. Then as a member on their panel, then I was with the Cultural Centre and the Management Committee. Then I was with the Law Centre and their Management Committee. I was with the Black Business Club. Although I didn't have a business, I always wanted to have a business. And I thought one way to get into it is to go in with the business people and learn the bottom way up. So meetings that they couldn't attend when they have various meetings, probably one of them could go. I used to accompany to find, hear all that's going on. And when they're having their banquets and all things, I was there in the hand and preparing. Many things. I've done many little things. And I've improved myself over the years by going to college. Extended education, I've done quite a lot of things. Yeah. And I know that I could have done better if only I did it earlier. But I decided that the opportunity is for my children. And I warned him from the age of 9. I counseled each one and I said, now if you're not going to do well, I'm sure I can do. And if I see any sign of deterioration, I'm going to do it myself. And when I start, I don't aim to fail. So you'll be left behind. And that was how I told him. And at the age of 9, I said, you'll have to leave this house in order to continue your education. You're not going to get your full potential if you stay here. And I mean, I would probably put on them, do this or do that, you know. But that was how I got that over. And I must say, thank God, 3 out of 4 as go the way that I've taught them. Then they got the additional education and then get the jobs they wanted. They've done very well. They've got degrees and they've had very good jobs, you know. So I am pleased. I feel fulfilled through my children. What I like to probably be with my mother and my father, I made sure that my children had it. And even though my mother was ill and in Jamaica, where we didn't get to see her and I couldn't afford to go home in those days, I used to get a letter once in a while, about 4 times a year, until she get more chronically ill, and it was 2 times a year until it was none. But I still used to write to the 4 Seasons, and I used to send her clothes home because she likes Mark and Spencer's clothes, and everybody could tell me, oh, she's got her Mark and Spencer's things, you know. She wasn't mentally ill that she was a danger, and she's a danger because she roams about, and she would get missed and out of place and whatever. And that's the reason why she had to be isolated. But she was quiet and reserved. And as somebody said to me not so long ago, somebody who comes from the same area that she came from when she was a child, he said, she is somebody special. Because when my father, at 29, was married, and the minister said to him, what are you doing? You need to get married. And he said, well, I haven't seen anybody that I'd get married to. And then my mother walked by and he said, yes, that one. And the minister said, no. He said, not that one. He said, she won't marry. My mother was seen to be eccentric, somewhat different from others. But as this man would put it, he says, your mother was an angel, sent to do God's work. Man intervened, and her life became a mess. Although his father and mother, I have to, you know, her life, she wasn't meant to get married, and her life became a mess. She didn't want to get married, but they arranged the marriage. And to how it worked out, probably shouldn't have been at all, you know, but my mother's been missing since 1980, never to be found. Not registered as dead.
It just disappeared?
Just disappeared. And she was in the hospital at the time, but she was well enough to be discharged. And I know how the sections work here, and she wasn't on a section, she was informal. Knowing that she'd been here for so long, she should have, and she's chronically ill, she should have been back to the hospital even once. I failed to think. Not failed to think, I know God is good, and she could be quite well with her family, but I've never discovered her. Put adverts out, people searching, and we've never found her.
Do you worry about
it? It is a skeleton in my cupboard. I would say it's the only problem that I've had in life since 1980, since she's been missing. It is my skeleton in the cupboard. My only worry in life, nothing else worries me. But I don't know. I don't cross her off as being dead, and I haven't closed the book. You know, I leave the book open. But as life goes, things do happen. You hear it happen to other people, and you think it can't happen to you, but it's possible. So, I go on. I whiz off to Jamaica very often, hoping that one of the times we go to the hospital, see all people who might nothing. And she's still got a sister in Jamaica, but it's been a tragic family. Her brother was killed by a passing truck, and a nephew was shot down. Her side of the family is really tragic.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
So that's one of your dark experiences.
Yeah. Without having that skeleton in my cupboard, I would be a very happy person. But that is a thorn in my side. Yeah.
But if I ask you, what is one of your brightest experiences to wrap up?
My brightest experience was actually to live. I asked God when, after my mother became ill, and I had children, to allow me to live until my last child was at least 12, and I would have trained her to cope, and that they would help each other. And now she's 31, and I only asked to live till she's 12, and I thank God for that. And my best experience is how my children have actually turned out. You know, they've turned out well. I didn't expect any less because I've put a lot in. But that's my crown, my shining glory.
The children.